Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to the third, I can't believe it's the third one, third New Zealand Music Producer Series. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Bathrooms, there's a bathroom up here and there's also one down the stairs. So just down the stairs and turn left, and if there's a fire, just run real fast for the door. And so I'd like to thank a few people before we start. There's a lot of planning goes into these events, and it wouldn't be possible without all the guys that record music in New Zealand. Damien, Dean, Mark, Sarah. They put a lot of time and effort into helping organise this. So I'd like to thank them. I'd like to thank all our sponsors: NZMPS, Aparamcos, Auckland Council, and also Auckland Council in their role as part of the UNESCO City of Music. Auckland's now the UNESCO City of Music, and they're really supportive of these events. So I'd like to thank Auckland Council for that. Our tertiary education sponsor is SAE Auckland. They've been really supportive, and they sponsored all the public seminars. And also the guys at Roundhead Studios, Charlotte, Emily, Paddy, and of course Neil and Sharon Finn for letting us use this beautiful building. Just want to talk about the goals of the producer series. The idea behind it is to bring producers and engineers of the calibre of Clint and Gil over here to help upskill producers and engineers in New Zealand, and just bring their expertise and help producers and engineers here interact with each other, and it's a really valuable part of the industry because it can be quite a solitary job, and to have a chance to actually spend time in a room with other engineers and producers, it's a really valuable event. Next week we've got the legendary Sylvia Massey here doing one of these seminars, and so if you've got a ticket, great, because we're pretty much sold out. If you haven't, we'll film that. We're going to film both these seminars and put them online, so you'll be able to access them on the Producer Series Facebook page. If you're going to post any social media, hashtags NZ Producer Series. We'll open the floor to some questions later on, but we've also teamed up with Robin Stodengoda, who was one of the producers here for the last series. He set up the production and mixing group on Facebook, which is really worth having a look for. It's just a producer group. We can all discuss recording techniques, and I've asked some of his members of the group to actually submit some questions for Gil for tonight. So I'll just give you a little bit of background for both tonight's guests. Clint began his career as engineer at York Street Studios in Auckland, working with New Zealand and based on international producers. He won the TUI Award for his work on Blind Spot's self-titled debut album. Currently based in the UK, he's become an in-demand engineer, mix engineer and songwriter, working with international acts like Thunder, Melanie C, Janati Coach, Trouble Gang. He also works with and develops new artists, including Youth Club, Kia, Courts, Twin Wild and Moses. After 3 further nominations, he won the TUI for Best Engineer last year for Devilskin's second album, Beat Out the River, having produced both albums for the band. Well done, Clint. Excellent work. The legendary Gil Norton started his career as an engineer at Liverpool's Amazon Studios and soon emerged as a world-class record producer, working with highly influential bands such as the Pixies on their Doolittle, Bossa Nova, and is it Tromplemont albums. And along with label mates Throwing Muses and Belly, he went on to produce artists such as Counting Crows, Feeder, Dashboard Conventional, The Distillers, and Jimmy Eat World. Some of his most high-profile work came when he produced The Colour and the Shape and the Grammy Award-winning Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace for the Foo Fighters. And it's not a bad little CV, Gil. So big welcome for Gil Norton. Are you on, Gil?
I'm on.
Yeah, I'm on. Yeah.
Important. We can share.
Oh man. Right. So we're going to let's kick off with a few nice simple questions. Do you want to start, Clint, as you've got the mic? So I'm just obviously the music industry's changed massively in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, what do you think are the most fundamental changes in the industry since you started?
I mean, there's been a few things. Possibly the transition for me as an engineer from tape to Pro Tools or DAWs, digital recordings. I think which has made, I don't know, it's changed like the way we kind of approach records, the way we make records slightly different. It means we can make records cheaper. We can make records in bedrooms. We can do things like that. I think it means it's given us a little bit of freedom as well to mess around with ideas, with plugins and various things like that. So yeah, I guess that technology has sort of changed and is quickly changing all the time, which I think has its advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, I think it can be seen. You can look at it as a positive or a negative. Obviously, there are huge changes in the fact that the budgets have completely changed. But it does mean that there's a lot more. The technology's kind of caught up with those changes. So you can a lot of the things that would be used to take a long time to do in the studio and now. Are now pretty easy to do. Millions of plugging in a million compressors and lots of different outboard. You can just like start up a few plugins and
I think so. And also it's also given people an opportunity to to just jump onto a computer and give it a go as well. To actually people who might not be even let's say qualified or have whether they've trained or not, they can open up a laptop, have GarageBand, Logic, or whatever, and just try and kind of create music, create sounds, and kind of experiment and explore. I think that's one change I guess I've seen. I mean, probably you might have seen a few more changes than me being in it for a longer period of time.
You're saying Gil's older. Yeah,
he's right. I think for me the big changes definitely come from using tape into the digital domain that we're in now. I think it's a lot easier for people to record things, and in a way it opens up the opportunities to a lot more younger people to record their ideas and to get their thoughts out easier. So, and it's not as expensive. I mean, years ago, people have to spend a lot of money to record a really good demo so they can have the chance to get a deal, where now you wouldn't have to do that. And I think, the record companies have changed as well a lot. Their opinions and what their approach is a lot different. I think they're expecting producers like ourselves to develop artists more, which is good and bad in a way. And I think it's a lot more throwaway for them. If things don't go instantly well, they'll cut people off.
I guess the onus is placed back on the producers, a bit like the industry when it first started.
Well,
it's like and then when it comes to taking less risks, and the risks are tending to come from people like ourselves developing artists. And because you do a lot of artist development, Clint, don't you? It's something that you've been doing a lot of artist development.
Yeah, I think, for me, one of the things for me, especially coming from New Zealand and trying to break into the UK, was handy, knowing producers like you guys. But for me to establish myself as a producer, when I met with a lot of labels and A&R and everyone, it's like trying to say, hey, I'm a record producer, I've done this and I've done that. A lot of the time, they would say, cool, do you do any songwriting? Do you, and my initial thing was, no, I don't. But then I soon realized I can flip that around and go, yeah, of course, I can, develop artists and I can songwrite. And so basically doing what I normally do, being in the studio as a producer and just helping, arrange songs and record stuff. And what I would actually do is start actually recording a song and producing a song, and I'm not actually doing anything different that I would normally do, but you become someone who is, I guess, developing an artist, and that's the way that I found easier to get in with people and get established with the A&R.
It's just that key of saying yes, whatever.
That's right, yeah.
The moment you sort of show any sort of weakness that you can't do something, it's all right, we'll find someone else. I think you've just got to be really positive in, and it's like the way to learn is to get thrown in at the deep end, isn't it? It's like, you know, how many times have you been confronted with like a desk you don't know or a lot of gear you don't know, and it's like, you know, you probably still know more than everyone else in the room. So you're going to I think it's just important to always have that positive approach to things, you know.
Totally, yeah.
I think, but most studios as well, especially before being in studios that we don't know, but the people that work there, like the staff here, I mean, everyone's really helpful, so you tend to get a good assistant, and they'll get you through wherever you need to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Do you, because you started as an engineer, Gil, didn't you?
yes.
So why did you move into, you know, was it a conscious decision to move into a more producer role, or are you still quite hands-on when it comes to engineering, or do you designate that to the engineers that you work with?
Well, I sort of stopped. It was a gradual thing, because I think as an engineer, you're very precious about what you want to get. So if you have a good assistant that's working with you, and I used to have, you know, assistant that worked with me, so they knew how I worked, and so I could designate a lot more of the chores that I didn't want to do. Or, I mean, the only thing I find sometimes when you're producing and engineering, there's a lot to do. I think the main job of producing, inverted commas, is to make sure the artist is being looked after, and you know, you're aware of the environment that they're in. I think sometimes if you start getting too involved in the technicalities of that, of the studio, if where the crackle's coming from, checking compressors.
It's easy to kind of like, hang on a second, I've got to sort this mic out, when you should be spending time with the artist.
And then things are happening within the session that you're not keeping tabs on. So I sort of started doing less, but I still, I mean, luckily at the moment I've got Clint who's engineering for me. But I can still dive on, and if I want something, rather than trying to describing sound, sometimes it's very difficult. Yeah. Sometimes you don't know until you hear it anyway. So
I think it's such a key in finding someone that you trust. I mean, until I worked with Clint, is it 2003? Was it 2003 the first time we worked together?
Yeah, we did.
You know, I'd produced, engineered, mixed all the records that I'd done, and when you find someone who actually who thinks in a similar way to you, who you realize has got a skill set that's kind of like it's going to make your record sound better, then it's a question of building up the level of trust, isn't it? And sort of, I enjoyed the transition from engineer to producers. I never wanted to be an engineer, and it was like, I think it's an important skill set to have that as a skill set as well, even if you're not doing much engineering.
Yeah, I only ever wanted. I mean, that's what I want to be, was an engineer or a TV cameraman. That's sort of what I want to do when I was at school.
Did you ever do any TV camera work?
I actually did, I must admit. I started when I was 17, 18. I was working with a youth opportunity scheme, and we used to film various things for the
like youth council programs.
Yeah. I was the first yop.
All right.
So and that's how I went into the studio in a way, because we went to film a band doing a demo, which was great. And
was that at Amazon, or was it?
Was at Amazon.
Yeah.
And then I was at college doing music, and I left. I went to work at Amazon just as for nothing. That's the other thing. I mean, when you start out, I don't think it's about the money; it's about the experience, and it's trying to get yourself into situations that are going to be good to benefit your career. So I think if you're chasing the money, you'll never get anywhere in this business, because it's not about that. It's even to this day, you know. I mean, we're all changing because the budgets have gone. So you don't look at a project just because how much you're going to make out of it at all. It's all, which is always what it has to be anyway. It's about if you're going to bring any value to it, and you know, if it's something that you're going to enjoy doing.
It's got to be about the record first, isn't it?
Oh,
because I mean, there are easier ways to earn money than being a producer or an engineer.
Yeah, well,
you got to love the music, you know. Yeah.
You know, you have to work hard, and you know, the big thing for me, I think, is that if you're going to take a project on, it's you've got the band's career in your hands, so. You can't just do it just because you think you're going to get a payday out of it. You have to do it because you love it and you're going to add value to whatever that is.
I mean, do you miss the fact that the the studio system is quite limited now. Whereas there used to be a lot of studios where you could start as a T-boy, work your way through the system, like you did at York Street. And in fact, York Street was one of the kind of the last studios I saw that had that system. And Roundhead as well. They still have a really strong studio system. And I think there's a huge value in that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think it's harder for young engineers and producers, people that want to record things, to get training, proper training. There's a lot of courses now, so I think they're good. I don't really know much about the courses. I didn't do one, but I think the people who teach at those are very good, and a lot of them are from the industry. But things like this are good as well, where people can come and have a look and see how other people... I mean, one of the things for me, because I didn't really... historically, when I started out, you were a tape op, and then you did that for 3 or 4 years. You made tea, and you watched people in the studio. You watched engineers, you watched producers, and that's how you got your skill sets. So you could see what you liked and didn't like. So, I mean, I had 2 engineers that used to work in the studio, and one was quite arrogant and a bit controlling, and the other one was a bit timid. And you sort of watch and learn what aspects of the way people work you like, take those on board, and then develop it yourself and try and work out what you want to do and how you want to present yourself in the studio in those environments, I think.
So what was the first session that sort of you moved from just assisting and making tea to actually like being trusted with the engineering?
I didn't really do it for very long. I assisted for 4 or 5 weeks, and then I actually just started running the 8-track studio. And I know you're from the prog rock days. Then.
Yeah, prog,
and my first band was a prog rock band that came in, and I'd been engineering inverted commas for like 6 weeks or something. And this guy walks in with, to this day, possibly the biggest drum kit I've ever seen.
You haven't seen my drum kit?
This guy, no, seriously. If he had the gong. In an 8-track, I had 16 inputs. and this guy had like, if you started off with a little rotor tom, and it was like about 15 toms. Seriously, it was China cymbals. It was the biggest. It had some syndromes as well, like pads, things. I was like, what am I supposed to do with that?
It's funny because Dave Rent said exactly the same thing last year, that his first session he was the band. I reckon it's the studio owners. They know there's a band coming in with a massive drum kit, so I'll just give it to Gil. He'll sort it out, And Dave Rent said exactly the same thing.
But I went to, because I walked in, I didn't know what to do, Literally, I went to the engineer who'd been engineering for quite a long time, and I said, I don't know what to do with this. And he went, get on with it. And that was it. So you sort of learn. I mean, that's the beauty, I think. There's no right or wrongs, or right or wrong ways of doing it. There's sort of skills that you can learn, the things that you like to do. But I mean, that's the beauty of being in this business. It's a creative business, and you can learn to do it the way you feel comfortable.
I mean, I think a big difference now compared to certainly when we started was, if we were on the engineer on the session, we knew more than anybody else. Now everyone has an awareness of what the recording process is. I didn't know what multi-track recording was. So my very first day I was in a studio with a band. What, you haven't got to play together? It's like you can record something separately after. I had no idea. I had no idea what mixing was, I had no idea what mastering was. So it's like there was a pretty good chance that you would know more than the artist. Now everyone's got a laptop, they've all got plugins.
The crazy thing is you get, the demos you get these days, they're just so incredible sometimes, you listen to them and you think, I don't know how I can actually make that better.
And you've got to say that, and you have to be honest with the artist if you think that, if they're already given you everything. It's like,
you somehow do. I think it's changed the way where you then get the demos in a computer-based form where they come to you. You get the stems or multi-tracks, and you kind of break them down, and you keep some stuff because it's great, but some stuff you want to change and that kind of thing. And that's definitely something that has, changed.
I think there's an element now of like some recording could be like attritional, right? You're getting so much stuff sent to you. You spend a lot of time putting things out because I think there's a tendency, but certainly with a lot of young producers to put too much stuff on tracks. I mean, I was hugely guilty of that back in the day, and probably still am. It's like, and you just find it's just taking stuff out of a track is, only getting demos of like, there's already 80 tracks for the stuff,
Yeah, I think working with the Pixies was one of the things I found really helpful on that level, because everything had to be portable. So, especially doing Doolittle albums, the first few albums I did, you couldn't overdub too many things because they want to be able to play them live, and if you couldn't play them live. So it was a good discipline in a way that you had to learn to, you had 4 elements and how you're going to make those elements work and get the dynamic and the drama out of the music that you had. And it makes you think about things a bit differently. So, less is more sometimes.
So did doing the Pixies records kind of change the way that you produce other artists?
Well, yeah, you learn every time you do every time you go in the studio, actually. Even now, I'll learn. Tomorrow, I'm going to learn something.
Yeah.
I'll definitely learn something tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is yet, but I'll learn something.
But whether it's good or bad, anything you learn is beneficial.
Yeah, but there are certain things that you take with you from session to session and experiences. I mean, I think the only thing as you get older, or you've done it a long time, is that you've been in certain situations. At the moment, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this. I don't do this. This is not a situation that's the normality for me to sit in front of people and chat about stuff, or do a session with people looking at you. It's a very insular sort of way to be.
So Clint was very persuasive to get you to come over then?
Yeah. Well, I've been here before, so any chance to come back to New Zealand is, you're not going to say, no, come on, you want to go?
Because it was like 2001, was
it?
it?
You think about that.
2001 you were here?
Yeah.
Producing the Communicate
Feelers.
For the Feelers, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I produced the album after that, and I remember...
I got sacked.
Did you? No, I think I was just a lot cheaper.
You probably were then.
But I remember sitting in the head of A&R's office after I went up to Melbourne and did some mixes at Sing Sing, and sitting there whilst they played me all the mixes from Communicate, said how great they sounded and how shit my mixes were, and how eventually I had to go back in with Clint and get him to remix a lot of the songs from the record. And so thanks for that. I really appreciate it.
Well, I had Dave Baskin mixing it. So.
Right. I thought Chris Sheldon mixed it. No, Baskin. All right. Yeah, no wonder I couldn't get him anywhere close. It was like, but so it was kind of. So we kind of both ended up meeting Clint in the same place. Yeah.
Same sort of time. Really.
So how did? So in the intervening 15 years, how did you end up working back together again? Because that's quite a long break in between records.
Well, we sort of kept in touch, and a mutual, my engineer, Danton, at the time, Danton Supple, you kept in touch with the...
I kept a good contact with him, yeah.
So we were, I spoke to Danton, and so I knew Clint would move back to the UK.
Right.
And it's just difficult because I tend to try and get... I don't like change very much, so it takes me a while. I have certain systems I need to do, so it takes me a while, inverted commas, to train an engineer into working the way I need them to work. Once I've got an engineer and I think they're good and talented, then it takes me a while just to get into a comfortable situation with them, so they know what they're doing. So, I kept trying to work with Clint, but I had a couple of good engineers that I'd already...
I mean, a lot of your engineers have gone on to be really successful. Danton produced Coldplay, Dan Austin, Guy Massey, who was here for the first producer series.
Adrian Bushby.
It's a pretty good selection of...
Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky, but, they managed to put up with me for about 3 or 4 years. And then they get bored.
Is that how long I've got?
They're sick of me.
So another 2 years and I'm out.
You're right, yeah. I've paid checks.
So Clint, how do you adapt to working with different producers? I mean, how much do you have to change your workflow depending on the producer you're working with? Because, I mean, I guess there are similarities to the way that myself or Gil would work, but I'm sure there's a lot of differences as well.
Yeah, I think I was kind of lucky to begin with because Gil was the first producer I ever worked with. So a lot of the things I picked up were, that was the benchmark for me. I was like, this is how it's done, and I copied a lot of those things. And then, strangely enough, you fast forward that 18 years, and get back together again. And a lot of those techniques, you know, were the same techniques. So that's kind of been quite an easy-ish transition.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the other thing that I found a little bit difficult too is I come up, you know, I have my own ways of working as well. So, but you really have to, you know, do what the producer wants. You know, you have to work. If we don't have a system that works together, it's just impossible to work, you know, together and feel comfortable. So, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, that Gil really, you know, likes the way things are set up, and there might be certain things that I sort of, after a while, say, hey, maybe we could try this instead, and we come up with different ideas together.
Which is good though, because I think, I mean, for me, it's a learn. As I said, you learn every time. I've got certain things that I like to start with, but I mean, the whole point of working or collaborating with people. So as far as I'm concerned, when we're on a session, it's a collaboration, you know, together. Yeah. So Clint, especially now we've worked together a bit more, there'll be things he'll just try that he knows the parameters. So, and I like that, because then it's stuff that I wouldn't have thought of, because, you know, as I said, you're learning all the time. So it's nice to be with a good engineer. For me, I find it exciting as well to have someone who's talented, who's, you know, who's thinking about it and passionate. I mean, that's the other thing with working with Clint for me. And all the good engineers are really passionate people. That's their life. The way they think is you know, the phones go off, their life stops at the door. Yeah. They come in and they're in the world, and then all we're involved with is make sure we get the best for the band. So, you know, I've been lucky to have that, and I think that's good with Clint. That now we're in a situation where I know he feels very comfortable in expressing his opinions, but he's very respectful as well. He doesn't go too far. Because I don't necessarily, if I want an opinion, I'll ask him, and I expect a really honest answer. You know, I don't like. It's pointless being a yes man if you're in a session. Yeah. If you're there, you're part of the team. You know, you've got opinions. I mean, sometimes Clint will say to me, "Oh, I'm not sure about that," and if it's something that I'm particularly liking, I might ignore it up to a point. But it's nice to have that, because it makes me think as well, because the whole, you know, there's no rights or wrongs in music, but I think there's a thought process that you go through. So sometimes having a bouncing board, a springboard of ideas, it's nice, because it sort of solidifies what you're trying to do in the first place.
I mean, I think, you know, ultimately you have to have a chain of command in the studio. Yeah. There has to be someone who's where the buck stops, who makes the final decision. And I think, I mean, one of the things I've struggled with, why myself and Clint ended up bringing a lot of young engineers, assistant engineers from New Zealand to the UK to work with us, because we found a lot of the trainees in the UK. They didn't want to be the bottom of that chain. They wanted to come in. I've got an idea for this guitar part, or I've got there's the kettle, there's the Hoover. You know, there has to be. You know, there has to, and we used to call it having the conversation, didn't we? I think you need to have the conversation. So Clint would take the assistant aside. This is not your place to actually have the. You know, we don't want to know your idea about that guitar part. You know, I think there has to be. You have to earn the right to do that. And if you're not going to do the washing up, you haven't got the right. You haven't got the right to set that microphone up, or make a decision on mics, or, you know, you need to earn the trust of the producers and the engineers. Well,
totally. But I find it's like a triangle when you're in the studio, because if I've got an engineer and an assistant, and the band, then or even forget the assistant, but sometimes with bands, what will happen is, if they're trying to do something that they don't feel like reacting in the right way, inverted commas, to what they want me to do, or what they think it should, they sort of try and go to Clint and get him to do what they want to do. So it's like a triangle. It's got to go, you know, it's got to go band me, Clint, and not band Clint, me. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think if you get that wrong, then you sort of lose why you're there in the first place. It's sort of, you may as well not be there.
But I mean, you know, but also you can't underestimate the role of a really good assistant in the studio. Oh no! You know, it's the whole team is really important. That it's it's like
that's what I'm saying. So it's collaborative, isn't it?
I mean, one of the first things I remember when I first met you and Danton, you know, and I can't remember whether it was you or Dant that said, you know, if you're going to be the assistant, you know, you're just as important as us. If you fall apart, we fall apart, you know. And just even if it's on the level of setting up stuff or writing down notes, recalls, making tea, making coffee, making people feel comfortable, an assistant is actually not just a low-level job. It is actually, you know, if you want to be a good assistant, you be a good assistant, and then you're part of that massive team, really.
And you often find those really good assistants go on to be really good producers. You know, Jimmy Robertson was a great example. Jimmy Snare, we used to call him, because we made him 60 gigabytes of snare drum samples. Could you catalogue those, please, Jimmy? And he did it all, and he did it beautifully. And now he's producing like Florence and the Machine, and it's like, so you spot those guys pretty early on.
I think pretty early on, don't you, whether they've got the X factor and the motivation and the drive and the personality.
Yeah, or Nick Portman here, when he was great.
But I think if you're going to, the other end of it, just on a practical level, if you're going to spend 14, 15 hours a day in a room with anybody, there's got to be someone that you quite like, really.
I mean, you end up spending longer with your engineer than you do with your wife, essentially.
Totally,
yeah.
On a session, you imagine on a 4-month session, and you get maybe a day off.
It's actually not that healthy, is it?
Still alive.
Yeah. So it'd be really good to know what, well, we had this discussion yesterday about, albums that really transformed your career. I know what it is, because I didn't know you actually produced that record until I spoke to you yesterday. But what was the album that really launched your career as a producer?
Well, I mean, I'm from Liverpool, which is a city in north of England. And
wasn't there some band from there, some successful band?
Weird band. But I was started just at the second generation of those bands started. So we were working with like China Crisis and Dead or Alive, Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, and Teardrop Explodes. And then I got the opportunity to work with Echo and the Bunnymen, which is a big change for me. It was 1983. And as I said, I was running the 8-track studio. Amazon and Mac came in to do some demos for the album, so I wasn't getting employed to actually to do the album. It was just he came in, it was just me and him, and we got on really well. And then Will came in, who's lead guitar player with Echo and the Bunnymen. And one of the things I remember, because I'd been to college, so I could tune the guitar for starters, and he came in and he'd forgotten his tuner, and he couldn't tune his guitar, and it actually weirded me out that someone who's done 3 albums couldn't tune the guitar. But we got on really well, and the demos were great. And then he went off to do it in Paris. And then I got a call about a week into the session saying, "Gil, you better get over here." So it's and it was the first time I'd actually flown. I'd never, so I was like 23, and I flew off to Paris. I remember I went down to Warner Brothers. It was like they were on Warner Brothers, and I had to see the A&R man. And I went in to see the A&R man. And great. And they said, "Oh, your car's here." And I went outside, and there's like a chauffeur with a hat and everything. "Yes, you Mr. Norton?" I went, "Yeah." I was like, "Here's your car." And there was this big stretch Mercedes.
So that was an Ocean Rain album?
Ocean Rain.
It's such a brilliant record. It's like, I just had no idea you produced it till the essay. It's not on.
Well, it's produced all concerned as it was produced by, because it was again a collaboration.
All productions are collaboration, Gil.
I mixed that as well.
Yeah, right. So what was the succession? So how do you go from that record through the Pixies onto the Foo Fighters? How does that chain of kind of like connections happen?
Well, I think with any of these things, it's just. I mean, after that, I got offered quite a lot of stuff. Like the Smiths, I got offered, but I was co-producing with Ian Brody from the Lightning Seeds at the time, and they didn't want him to do. It was Meet His Murder, actually, was the album that I didn't do. But so stuff just sort of happens, and then I didn't have a manager, an agent, and I think it was important. And a friend of mine said, "You need to find someone to help you out, because it's very difficult, I think, when you're trying to do everything. I think, especially as a young engineer, all you're trying to do is become a good engineer or a good producer. So the business aspect of that is, that's not it's not very high on your radar at the time. So I needed to find someone that was going to help, say, oh, try this. He's a new young engineer. So I ended up getting a guy called John Reed in London, and he took me on a trial basis for a while. So after that album, that's where he took me for a meeting with Ivo of 4AD. Right. He was the guy that ran the label, and we just went out for dinner once. So I met him once, and he liked me and sent me over to America with a check for like £10,000 to do Throne Muses. So, it's just stuff like that. And I did Throne Muses, and then I was going to do the next Throne Muses album, and the Pixies were the support band for Throne Muses. So I saw them in Boston. So it's just things. It's surprising, really, because I remember doing a band called 7 Day Diary, who were a band from San Francisco, and it didn't do. It was a great album, but it led on to me doing Counting Crows, because they were friends of Counting Crows, and besides other things. But it's interesting, things that I think as long as you do your best on everything that you do, you don't know where they're going to lead to. It's and
I guess the Foo Fighters came because Nirvana were big Pixies fans. Yeah. In fact, those Pixies albums was just really influential to a whole generation of musicians. And it's often good to have artists who are on your CV who are actually other bands really like. Mm-hmm. I was really lucky doing the Manic Street Preachers records because other bands like them. And they tend to gravitate towards records of other bands that they like. So it's like, and the Pixies is one of those bands that most bands love. Love the Pixies.
It's funny because you learn a lot from artists, and someone like Charles is Frank Black is a really interesting person to spend time with, because he makes you think slightly differently, because he gets bored. He doesn't want to do anything twice, is the thing. So if he's not stimulated, you'll lose him, and he'll wander off. His brain goes to some other planet, just not even in the same room. So I remember and the thing I still do now is when I'm producing, I start, and I do with Grohl as well, was taken back to the basics, because I think as songwriters sometimes the initial idea you have gets diluted when you're in the room with the band and other people. So I tend to try and like to go back with an acoustic guitar and sit with the artist just with an acoustic guitar and talk about the song and why it exists, and try and get the pulse of it, because sometimes a songwriter takes a song into his band's environment, and then the drummer plays his bit and he's not listening to the song, or doesn't. And then, before what the song, I mean, sometimes that can work great, and other times you can really lose the soul of the song.
So was Taylor Hawkins or Dave Grohl playing drums on the albums that you did with the Foo Fighters?
On Colour and Shape, it was William Goldstein was doing the original drumming,
right?
And then he'd lost.
I remember seeing a documentary, Foo Fighters documentary, wasn't it? There, I think didn't him and Dave fall out, and Dave ended up playing.
Well, Dave ended up playing, but it wasn't he fell out. It's just I think it's very difficult when if you're in a band playing drums and
Dave Grohl's your singer.
Well,
that's going to be intimidating.
So, and I loved William. I thought he was a fantastic drummer. He still is a fantastic drummer, but he got himself a bit tense. I think, especially in the studio environment, you've got, which is really important. This is why I tend to do 2 weeks pre-production before I ever go into a studio with a band, for two reasons. One, just to get to know each other, and two, to work out on the songs. So you know exactly what you're trying to do by the time you hit the studio, because that's the expensive bit. That's the bit where that's where the money starts going. If you're in your local rehearsal room, then you can work a lot of the things out you're doing, and then by the time everyone gets into a studio, everyone's relaxed, and you're going to get some good performances and make good music. So it's not. But I think with William, what happened with him, he got himself tense and he overplayed. So, at the time we'd have like the drum doctor come in and with these guys in LA, and they tune the drums and tune them to the rooms, and they're amazing. So you sit there and you listen to the drum kit, it's going singing, and you're like, wow, this is incredible. Don't have to do anything. And he'd come in and just try to beat it to death.
Right.
So he choked it. And nothing would ring. And then, after 4 or 5 takes, when he was trying to lay the parts, he'd get exhausted. So, he wasn't doing himself any favours. So by the time we got to Christmas and we'd done quite a lot of the songs, I wasn't happy. Some of them I was happy with, and some of them I thought we needed to do them again. And I remember speaking to Dave on the phone and said, I think we need to do some of these again. They're quite right, yeah. And he said, initially it was, I'm not playing drums. I'm never playing. Right. I'm just a rhythm guitar player, so I don't want anything to do with the drums. So I respected that, and I didn't ask him. And then he said to me, would you like me to play drums on this? And I went, yeah, if you want to. And I think the first one we did on that album was Monkey Wrench.
Right.
And because I'd done it to a click, I set him up. It was in LA, and I set him up. We got a good drum sound, and I played it once, and he played that drum track in a go, just like that was the drum track against the backing track that was already recorded, and I was like, oh my god. So we weren't going to do a lot of the tracks, but we ended up doing about half the album in the end.
One of the questions we had from one of Bromwich's group was, you're known for ensuring rhythm sections are on point. Do you tend to use Beat Detective much these days, or do you ensure drummers get the perfect take? And it might be worth us expanding on that, because it's kind of like...
Well, I think it's important, with music, it's the foundations. So if you don't get your foundations, it's like building a house. If you don't get your foundations right, then none of it's going to work. So if the rhythm section isn't good, if you haven't got the right parts, if you haven't got the right feels, then whatever you put on top of it is never going to feel right. It's never going to sit. So I like working with drummers. I don't think I'm overly harsh with drummers, but it has to be right. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, it's my job to explain what that is. But normally I'm working with a decent drummer, so they know. You two are both drummers, so if you're playing well, and if you got most of the time. Nearly every musician self-pleases, if you've done something good. But I think the only time the drummers or any musician gets frustrated is that if they don't understand why you're making them do things more than once. If you get a confused artist, it's the end, because they lose it. They get frustrated. They don't know what's going on. But if you can explain why you're making someone do something again, and the importance of it, or sit them down and make them listen, because I think that's the most important thing. With the rhythm track is they listen to each other. A lot of bass players and drummers have their parts, but they're not listening to each other. Yeah. And I think it's really important that section works together as a whole, because if that's right, then everything else you can slot it all on there. So.
Yeah. And I've always felt it's important that drummers have a lead vocal to play with as well, and sort of so they've got to have an idea of what the top line's going to do.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because with say the Pixies, because when they got with Doolittle, we had demos for it, so it's easy to do, and you go into a room. But when we did Bossa Nova, we didn't have all the songs. We had a few songs, but we didn't have all the songs ready. But because we knew each other, it was easy to work on parts. So, Charles would have, he'd have like, he'd have like a bit that was a verse. Do that. I'd have this bit, it was going to be the chorus. And so then we'd have those two bits, and then we could expand on that, and I could, you know, I used to, in my head, going back to being doing films, I used to make my own little videos up of the songs and landscapes and try and get a dynamic within the music. So it didn't always necessarily have a top end.
Right.
It's dangerous. I think that is dangerous if you don't know the band, you know.
Yeah.
But again, I think some of the, you know, the best albums or some of the best songs have come later as well, because if I've worked with a band, if you've gone through the 2 weeks pre-production and you've altered the songs and have started thinking about what makes the song work, then if they can keep writing in that environment, sometimes they come up with the best work, because they realise what we haven't got. Or what
There's a lot of downtime in the studio for musicians.
Yeah,
you know,
but
it's a
some
great
people
time
just
to be
waste
creative.
it, you know. I mean, but someone like Grohl doesn't. Grohl sitting like the room there, that back room, while you're doing other things.
So no pool tournaments.
No, you know, really
Table tennis tournaments.
Tennis. No, we definitely have that too. But you know, they constantly work. It never stops. It's not like I've finished it. Especially in that period of time, because that's a creative writing period where they're getting stuff. So they're constantly working, and there's never a stop to it. You know.
Yeah.
And you know, things like we didn't have with the Foos, we didn't have Everlong and Colour and Shape.
Was that written on the session?
That was written in the middle of it. You know, we had to break a week, and he came back with that song because it was a song that we didn't have for the album. We didn't have that colour, that texture.
Yeah.
So but his awareness of that I liked as well, because I think, as I say, it's that self-policing. It's looking at what you've got, thinking what's good and what's bad and what could be better or what's missing. So I think, you know, you've always got to try and improve and make sure you get the best out of yourself, because, you know, you're letting yourself down if you've got these opportunities and then you're not pushing yourself as much as you can. Because, as you said, some people could spend a lot of time in the studio. You know, like Nath, the bass player in the Foos, he'll set himself up a little workstation upstairs and work on his bass lines for hours, you know, just working on them.
I mean, nothing's more irritating than a band playing sort of Guitar Hero all day and then not having the guitar parts down when they come in the studio.
Yeah, totally.
That used to drive me absolutely crazy. So, you know, you can play Knights of Sidonia on Guitar Hero, but you can't play that 3-chord bash you've got for the song. It's like, as Clint would tell you, I used to get pretty worked up. You know. So who's harder on drummers, me or Gil?
Harder what?
Harder on drummers.
On drummers?
More of a bastard to drummers.
Well, I think you being a drummer is you have certain things that you're more in tune, you know, in
trying to get
tune
to play
with.
like me.
You're definitely harder on. You're definitely a harder personality on drummers.
Gil's a nicer guy than me.
That's a matter of opinion. I've talked to my wife about that.
So me. Right answer.
But I don't think it's about being hard on anybody. I think it's about, as I said, just making sure that they know what they're supposed to do.
We had a long chat over lunch about this yesterday, about how little attention when discussing production is given to like the mental side of producing, the motivational side, trying to get that extra 20-25% out of everyone's performance, because that's where the gold is in a record, isn't it? Because, you know, you'd expect to come in.
It's making that environment safe, because, you know, people go, what's it like working with that person, because they must have a big ego, and you're like, but we don't see that end of it, I think, in a way, because it's the most insecure an artist is in a recording studio to me, because they don't know what the fuck they're doing, you know. I mean, it's where they're working ideas out. So you haven't got that persona. I mean, it's different when they've finished it and they know exactly what they're doing, and they go onto like a stadium stage and they just, you know, performing that. But when you're trying to work on the actual initial idea, then it's not about egos. It's not about, you know, pushing people. It's about creating a safe environment where people can be creative and feel safe and make mistakes. Because making mistakes is a lot of times where you get the best, you know, the things happen, the magic happens. This comes from, you know, accidents or, you know, when you go off on a tangent. So if they don't feel like they've got the opportunity to do that,
Yeah.
you know. But then again, it's trying to rein it in because you can't waste time. So going off on things you definitely know are not going to work. That's part of our job, is to go, you know, well, we can try. I feel, though, because I remember I was doing James with Lenny Kay, producing. He's the lead guitarist, Patti Smith. I was engineering, which was one of the few times where I engineered and someone else was producing. So that was very interesting for me to watch the conversations that went down, because, and you know, as an engineer, sometimes you have to just button, you know, it's nothing to do with you, so you sit there. But I remember this conversation went on for like 2.5 hours about whether the merit of putting an organ on a track. And I just sat there and was like, at the time I was smoking, I couldn't really go and have a cigarette either, because I had to be there because they wanted me to play. And I was so frustrated. And that, to me, all I could keep in my head was thinking, just try. Just, you know, it would have taken 10 minutes to try it. And then gone, well, that's not going to work, is it? You know, so sometimes it's a lot easier just to do stuff than it is to have these silly conversations and frustrate somebody. Because unless you've tried it, you don't really know whether it's going to work or not.
And it's amazing how many times that happens. It's like, it's just, those endless studio debates about
all the time. And I think that the only way, I mean, especially like being a producer, you might have an idea, or a band member has an idea, and I think that's one of the things that, as we always say, well, let's at least try these things. You can try it, you can record it, and you can play it back. You could try those two ideas and play those two ideas back, and it will be so obvious which is the right idea, or what doesn't work, you know.
I mean, do you think, you know, I know we've had this conversation a lot about sort of, you know, just having, you know, bands can tend to be, you know, sort of, they'll have a strong idea about what they want to do and what they want the record to be, and you've got to kind of gain their trust when you know, just give it a go, and you know, ultimately you will decide as the artist, you know, what works for you. You know,
totally, yeah. And I think, I mean, that's one thing that, you know, I think Gil is exceptional about, and that's really spending time, like, listening to the artist and trying out their ideas at the expense of, it might take a whole day to we just did a record just recently where, I mean, how many days did we spend on one particular song because we wanted to, you know, the artist wanted
quite a few nights,
quite a few midnights, and it was just, you know, wanting to try this, and you know, we keep trying, and you know, it's quite cool to see actually, for, you know, because I'm thinking myself, you know, we're going to run out of time, you know, like we got to do this, we've got to do stuff, and you know, for you to give the artist that amount of time to try, and then at the end of it, the artist went, yeah, I guess those ideas didn't really work. Let's just do what we originally discussed, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
The song turned out great.
The song turned out fantastic.
That was the thing. But at any point, I could have been negative with it and just not given him the time to develop his ideas, and that's not my job, because they're not my songs at the end of the day. I think as a producer, unless you're the songwriter in there, you know, I mean, we help and we can guide and we can suggest, but ultimately it's I don't have to go and play this for 20 years, you know what I mean? It's not like, so you've got to make sure that wherever you're suggesting, that the artists can feel comfortable with, and B, it's going to benefit their careers, you know what I mean? They've got to buy into it. If they don't buy into it, so sometimes it's a two-way street. Sometimes they've got to convince me that it's a good idea, so I've got to give them time and the freedom to be able to do that without stopping it, you know what I mean? And it's easy to do it in the studio. You can just go, you can be dismissive, but then you might have just lost something that would have been amazing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard with the clock's ticking, right?
But yeah, or you're tired. I mean, the other thing is, I mean, when we were doing that as well, it was quite frustrating because we tend to get into this about 8 o'clock at night. So
the blood sugar's getting a bit low.
5 hours. And you're thinking, this is going nowhere. Yeah. But you had to let that.
But ultimately, now, you know, the artist knows that you went the extra mile for that, and they will, you know, it's like, It's,
and they will come back and do another record with Gil and I, or what, just because it's that trust is there, that that they're going to listen, that Gil will listen to him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's because it's quite nice in my career, because I've managed to do 2, 3 albums, 4 albums with some art. So it's quite nice when people come back to you and go, well, we enjoyed it. There's a certain point where I think, I need them to go somewhere else. I mean, it sort of happened with the Pixies to a certain extent, where they need to go somewhere else just to get, to push them into a different feel or a different area of stuff, because you don't always want to be in your comfort zone. And I think that's the thing.
It's probably
nice
one of the hardest things to producer to kind of like say to an artist, I think someone else would be better for this record, because you're so used to kind of like, you start your career and you want to do everything, because you want to be everything to everybody. And then the moment you free yourself up to actually say, no, I don't think I'm the right person, or this, you give this person a call, I think they'll be really good. It's an immensely freeing feeling, because you're just kind of like, you're ultimately, all the things you say about wanting to sort of, do what's best for the music, that's the kind of embodiment of that you can turn work down. And I think it's a really, really important. But yeah, I find after 2, 3 albums, it's good for you as a producer and the artist for them to try something else. They might come back. They could very well come back.
Well, that happened with me with the Foo Fighters for 10 years. After, and Counting Crows, I mean, they went away for 10 years and did other things.
So how is it like with the Foos coming back after that bigger break to do another record?
Well,
because I guess they'd completely blown up during that period.
Yes. Oh, yeah, obviously. I mean, it was interesting just because, there was talk before that at certain points about, working together, and for various reasons it didn't happen, I think, in my opinion anyway, I think Dave felt like the band were in cruise control at one point, and he just wanted, a kick up the arse, basically.
Right.
Someone just to give him a bit more stimuli.
So get the guy from Liverpool to do the ass kicking.
That's the way.
Yeah.
It'll be good.
We should probably have a bit of a tech chat, because we're all sort of
Clint.
We're all nerds.
Just a few kind of short questions. So, favourite studios, and why are they your favourite studios?
Well, I think York Street would probably be my favourite, because it's where I grew up, and it's where I touched my first compressor. It's got a lot of memories for me. For bands I've worked with, New Zealand artists that kind of launched my career as well. People I met, both you guys. Definitely that, but that's gone now into the ether. I love Rockfield. Is still probably. I mean, I like places.
Real producer's studio, Rockfield. We had the same Romesh and David Wrench last year. Myself, you, Girl. We all. There's something about that place that's kind of magical.
What's good about Rockfield? I don't know if anyone knows what do you all know Rockfield Studios? It's like a studio in Wales, actually.
That's why it's good.
It's the oldest residential recording studio in the world.
Yeah, 1969 it's open. But what is good about it, there was 2 things as a producer that why it works. One, it's just got great gear. The rooms are fantastic. They're really good rooms. It's very versatile. And because it's residential, you're there together all the time. So, if you're in a big city or something, and then you have to go to the accommodation, you've got all the, you lose your band. I mean, sometimes I've lost bands, it's like they've gone off and they've got drunk, and, I've lost a day because I can't find someone. It's just it's crazy. But at Rockfield, you're there, and that's where you're going to work. And you really bond, because you eat together, you sort of, you have that period of decompression, because sometimes when you're in that room, in the environment for long periods, it can get tense. So to go at the end of the night and have a glass of wine, or just to chill out. And then
I think it's nice. You can walk out the control room and you're outside.
Yeah.
You're out in the fresh air. It's a really nice.
And you've got your own space as well. So even you can go to your rooms. So for me, that's why there's a couple. There's another one called Mono Valley, which is crazily enough, is about a mile away from Rockfield. It's in the same town.
It's actually in Rockfield.
It's actually in Rockfield.
It is in Rockfield.
Yeah.
So, but the reason they're good though is because they're residential. So, and the other thing, as a producer, because you've got budgets, you need to keep an eye on how much you're spending, and I know how many days I can get there. So if I know I've got 30 days to do an album because that's what the budget is. It's not going to cost me any more, any less, and I can get a proper budget together. Whereas sometimes if you've got to factor in taxi drives and food and
I think because it's on the family farm, they own the gear, they own, they're willing to do deals. They like people to be part of their family, which I've always found at Rockfield was a really nice.
Did they have the generator there, the Kinsley?
Oh yeah, I mean you factor in the studio manager is a really wonderful eccentric man who took me and Clint for a drive in his powder blue Rolls Royce one day, and it's just he tells you the same thing a lot.
Oh yeah.
But you factor that into your day's working, and
He had the band to work with Joe Meek.
Yeah,
So we get lots of Joe Meek stuff.
But it's not even the world's plushiest studio. It's Hessian walls. But that kind of, I mean, it's where Queen recorded Bohemian Rhapsody. It's where first two Coldplay records, their first Oasis records were done there. Hemispheres by Rush was done there. It's just that there's so many amazing records that were done, and bands feel it when they're in that space.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of like their record. I remember being there when we did the Chaskin record there, which they ended up naming after the studio. The album was called Rockfield, and they would getting pictures of like Freddie Mercury sitting on the couch at the back and all this stuff, and it's like they feel that kind of atmosphere, and they feel the sort of the presence of those artists, whether it's a real thing or not. It works for them. It works for artists to be in that environment.
Well, it's nice to be. It's like this studio, isn't it? You walk in as an artist, you think, you've arrived. It's there's heritage and there's.
It feels like a studio designed by a musician. That's why I like it.
Yeah.
It's like all the things you want. Natural light, line of sight. It's.
I mean, I think we've had the luxury of work, with the bigger budgets and having the luxury of nice studios. And I think when you do work in these places that are nice, you have just exactly what you said, versatile rooms. So you might have drum rooms where you can have a big open space, or smaller booths where you can do drier things. You have amazing recording consoles. You have fantastic microphones. I mean, places like ICP in Belgium, which has about 50 drum kits and about 1 million compressors that I've never heard of, and
so a mic room about the size of that control room.
It makes you do different things. It makes you create different records, or take you out of your comfort zone, and try things. And that's when I really,
because we had a policy at ICP that we weren't allowed to use any gear that we'd ever used before. So they've got like racks and racks of guitar pedals and amps, and it's like, and our policy was if we'd ever used it, we weren't allowed to use it. So, and we came up with some really interesting things on that record because we failed a few times as well, but it was like
we also had another rule though, and you were only allowed to bring 2 new things out. Because otherwise, you'd be there all day.
Because they would literally give you sort of plastic buckets so you could go and grab all these guitar pedals. So it kind of did get a bit of hand. What was that? They had a compressor that they used to use on US submarines.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, just to actually to compress the signals to send through water. It's just like one huge Bakelite knob on the front. Yeah, it was like, it just looked cool when you stacked it all up. Plugins just look so tame after all that gear, didn't they? So my next question would be favorite mics and outboard.
Is this my question?
You should start it. You're a bit more sort of like anal.
Well, vocals are hugely important to me. But so my favorite mic would probably have to be a vocal mic, a Sony C800 G-Pack. Yeah, I love that mic for vocals. It's very bright, present. It's everything.
SM7 can't go wrong.
This is
type of guy I am.
This is obviously an ongoing debate.
This is an ongoing thing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that mic. To be honest, I think if you had any decent mic, I mean, 57s, U87s, classic. You can make anything with that. You can make anything with anything really. But
it's just a lot of things, like working with Grant from Feeder. I mean, he wants a 57 because he wants to do this. He wants to be able to move around and sing. He doesn't want to be restricted by having a big posh mic. And so, you know, it's not always about the best quality mic. It's about getting a good performance, I think. So it doesn't...
Did you do any control room recording with him with the 57?
Yeah, I've done that, and with Grohl as well.
Yeah, because I did it with James on the Lifeblood album for the Manics. We did all the vocals in the control room with a 57, and him sit there with a cigarette and a 57 on the couch, and he did all the vocals and backing vocals. And it's the performances were great. He's a great singer, so he could sing into like anything, and it would sound really good. You know, so it was.
It's one of those engineers' worst nightmare moments, isn't it?
Yeah, I've tried it with you a few times. You can see Clint kind of like sort of getting a bit twitchy when I'm starting to propose these ideas. And it's like, just wire the NS10s out of phase and we'll just do.
I know, tried that. I never worked either.
Yeah, we did have a problem when we moved from the band studio to Grouse Lodge in Ireland, and so James, I'll just sit on the couch at the back of the room, but the couch is like 10 times further away. So obviously the delay, we had to actually measure up the studio and get the delay times and do it. It was a bit of a nightmare.
That's too much time.
It was just where there's times wasting times in the studio. So that was the studio I was telling you about over lunch yesterday, where I had that disastrous evening where I'm trying to play the stuff to the head of Sony, and it was kind of like I just knew it wasn't going well. And it was like kind of just I thought Gil liked this story, and it was like, it was just what a miserable experience it was. And then he busted out how you have to say no to Jimmy Iovine story, which kind of trumped. Do you want to just give us a quick précis about the time you said no to Jimmy Iovine?
Yeah, well, I was doing Dashboard Confessional, and which was his favourite band. He signed them and we were in Miami, and I didn't know he was coming to the studios. And it's always weird when you have another producer who's A&Ring anyway, who's going to rock up the studio when you're in the middle of recording. So it's chaos, isn't it? It's not, you're trying to play things that don't even sound that good, in your head. So you're not particularly comfortable. And then he wanted, and we had no time left, so we were really busy. So the last thing I wanted to spend half a day entertaining the record company at the time. And then he asked me to do something like, could the band play it live for him, Walt? I said, no, I haven't got time for that, Jimmy. It was just like, I'm really busy, mate. And then he asked me if, I don't know, with a mind doing something else, and I said no. And then he said, could they take a monitor mix if we were up to? And I said, well, not really, Jimmy. He said to me, Gil, no one ever says, someone says no to me 3 times. And I was like, well, that's
a pretty brave move, to be fair. Yeah.
Well, it just had to be done at the time.
Didn't you have to drive across town as well, to like across LA, to sort of play monitor mixes of bass and drums?
Yeah.
Take you like 2.5 hours each way.
That was the Jimmy world. And, I don't know if anyone's been to LA, but it's not the easiest to get from, to Santa Monica in the middle of the day. And so, he just rings up and goes, Gil, I need to listen to what you're doing. And I was, oh, no, it's just...
It's stressful, it's stressful, isn't it? Yeah.
But, you have to... I mean, it's not them and us. That's the only thing sometimes with the bands, at the end of the day with the record company, says, I think we all want the same thing. We, unless the record companies are happy with what you're doing, they're not going to support it. So, it's important to give them the time that they need sometimes, just to appease. And
I mean, it's stressful because you're trying to, you want to focus on the artist, but that you've also, the label is such a huge part of it.
Well, it's interesting as well. I mean, it's going to be interesting for me tomorrow because I've never actually worked with people watching me. I don't even know what it's going to be like. But because when you're in the studio, you're in with the band and stuff, sometimes whoever walks in the control room changes the dynamic of the room. Yeah. So, it makes you react differently.
It's like when you play a mix to somebody and you've been listening to it all day, and then someone else comes in and you instantly hear everything that's wrong with that mix.
Totally, yeah.
It's just like, why does that happen? I've listened to this mix like 300 times today, and it's like all of a sudden it's wrong because now you're in the room. It's like, why? But
why don't I like this?
Yeah, it's like So yeah, I mean, Dave Ringer described it as recording as a spectator sport, which is, it's kind of, it is kind of strange, but it's also a really brilliant way to learn. I mean, I knew that when I, in the few times that these days where I play on a session rather than produce it, and it's like, I still enjoy spending time watching the producers working, because it's like you pick up so many new things.
Well, I think it's interesting now because I think, a lot of people, a lot of young engineers are coming out of schools and not really going through the whole studio process. So that end of the education of recording is not there. It's lost. You're not going to have those opportunities. So that's why, for me, it's quite exciting as well to do it, just because it's, when we find a good assistant or someone, it's nice to make sure they're learning in a good way and nurture them. So I'm sure, for some people, it's a good opportunity to see a session that they would never have the opportunity to
I
do.
know it's been really beneficial for a lot of the producers that have been on the previous ones, and I mean, I learn something every time, it's like, it's, goodness knows what's
there.
Goodness knows what's going to happen next week when Sylvia's here. She'll be dragging guitars down the street behind a van and all kinds of stuff. So it's and the contrast is really interesting. Watching two different producers work in three, in this case three, over the course of 2 weeks and seeing the contrasts. It's really it's quite. There's a lot of similarities to the way people work, but there's also a huge amount of different approaches, and a lot of it's mental and motivational.
Well, that's what I said earlier, that there's no right or wrong. So
No.
I think it's just, I think you've got to find a way that you feel comfortable about doing these things and that you make the artist feel comfortable. So it's just about the environment. So I think that's the most important thing.
Got a couple more tech questions, then we'll go out to some questions. But mixing, are you? I guess you're both mix. Are you both mixing in the box now? Have you been mixed together, records together? How's that dynamic been working?
Yeah, well, we've been mixing quite a lot. I mean, I've got a small studio at home, so most of it's in the box, but I go through a summing amp, so I've got a Chandler summing amp that we go to. But it was interesting this time because we took the mixes we did and took them back to where Clint's environment.
What's a modern world? Yeah.
So we sort of mixed it and we tweaked it there because it was quite nice. Again, with the budgets, the way we have to work these days, you've got to find different ways of doing things. So you can't necessarily mix in a recording studio for 3 weeks or 4 weeks the way we used to be able to do. I think now what we have to do is do a lot more outside that environment where it's cheaper and you can spend. It's all about time to me. I mean, this is the thing. It's to make sure you have enough time to do it right. So, I can spend time at home getting up to a point, but it was nice to take it to, like a proper room, inverted commas.
Yeah, I mean, for me, 2 years ago, I was staunchly mixing on ACSL consoles. And that was it. I was actually afraid of mixing in the box, and
because we had that,
we had that conversation.
It's like, you need to start because everyone else was doing it.
Yeah, and I was.
But it worked for us, didn't it? We'd done it a lot, mixing on the.
Yeah, I felt comfortable. I loved it. It was like where my passion was, and I just, I was honestly afraid of doing the in the box thing. And then you taught, basically, I needed a way to find a way that I could drop the budgets down for people, the cost of mixing, but for me to earn more money in a way. And so making that transition to in the box, I really needed, I felt I needed a lot of analog gear, summing amps like you're saying, compressors and things like that to make it still have that kind of gel together. But I think I have two scenarios where I, work with, like Gil, and we mix from the point that we start recording. That's the thing. So the mixes kind of develop, and by the time you get to the end, you have these pretty amazing monitor mixes, and then you only need to tweak them really. But then I do a lot of mixing for other people. So depending on the artist, whether it's a band like Thunder, who are an old school rock band, I give them the option of, do you want me to do an analog desk mix? But that only works when you've got quite a basic, drums, bass, a few guitars, vocals. I love that. It's great. But you know, a lot of my kind of mixing techniques or our mixing techniques kind of stem from that analog anyway. And to be honest, I mean, I pretty much, like on every channel, put like a UAD SSL plugin on each one, you know, because I'm used to mixing on an SSL. So, yeah.
I think the other thing is that the plugins now have got so good, you know, that, I mean, seriously.
I mean, UAD seems to have been a bit of a game changer for everybody.
Yeah, well, there's a few. There's Waves as well, I think, are good as well. So there's a few really good simulations of you know, the way the modelling the equipment now is amazing. So it makes that viable. It makes mixing in the box viable now, and I think I still like to have a summing amp, but I don't necessarily think you need to have one. It's just something I quite like, that analog stage. I think it just, you know, glues it together.
Are your two setups compatible, or you pick a setup to work on and use that?
Well, it was interesting because we swapped around, didn't we?
Yeah, I have an SSL summing amp and SSL mix bus compressor. You have a TG summing amp and a SSL mix bus. So our inputs and outputs are all the same. So we can actually take it from my studio to your studio. But we've aligned a lot of our work techniques the same to make that happen. Yeah.
Well, as Clint said, I think the thing that we've been doing a lot is not treating mixing as mixing. I think it's just the end process of it. It's not, we don't pull everything down when we start mixing. We've got good monitor mixers that everyone, especially the bands, because sometimes they're not there when we're mixing now, but we've got the songs up to a point where they're really happy by the time they've left the studio. Yeah. So we tweak the monitors as much as anything because they're already in a good place. So that way you don't have to spend too long agonizing over, you know, what's going on. You already know you're in the right
did you used to find, Gil, when back in the day when we were mixing on boards all the time and using tape, that often those monitor mixes had a certain magic that the final mixes didn't?
Oh, totally. I mean, some of them, that's what you'd use.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few albums, right, you know, the monitor mixes are the final mixes for the record.
Yeah. You know, especially as you got a bit more experience, you realised at the end of it when you used to just put things down, you record. If you knew you had like a song that was sounding good at the time, you just put it down. But the only problem is in those days is that it was very difficult to get a mix back up. You know, I mean, You, once you started a mix, you sort of had to finish it, you know, because that was the end of your studio day. And if you came back in 2 weeks' time, you would never get the mix back. It just never.
And it just wouldn't be feasible now because all artists want to do at least like 5 recalls. You know, the hi-hat needs to come down 1 dB in verse 2, and you know other inconsequential stuff. You know,
but that's one of the great things where we're up to with
you
know, technology at the moment. I think just embracing it and using it the way, you know,
it takes the pressure off. I think, you know, because Clint mixes a lot of records for me, and it actually it's great because I'll send him, you know, the tracks with rough mixes and some notes about, sometimes they're quite narrow notes that it needs to be within this form. You know, this is what we're going for. Sometimes just do what you do and enjoy it, you know. And it's quite nice that each morning I'll get mixes back, and then, you know, he'll go to bed and I'm here all day and I play them all day, and then send notes over, and you can actually crank through an album fairly quickly. And it's without being in the box. That when I first moved here, we were doing it on the duality. Be like, can you wait up till 3 a.m. while I'm recording the mix, kind of thing. So it has made, I think it's made a lot of producers' workflows a lot easier.
Yeah, but we're talking about that monitor mix thing. You know, for me, like as a mixer, that's one of the most important things I can get when someone sends me something to mix, is their vision of how it was when they left the studio. It's how the producer saw the track, and you know, I will listen. That's the first thing I do: listen to the track, make notes about what I like and what I don't like, and what I need to do. And those things I try and do as quick as I can. So, you know, it takes a long time to set up a session generally. I mean, if it comes to someone like Greg, he set it up the way I like it, but I might spend, let's say, 6 or 7 hours actually going through everything and tidying it up. And if I put samples on or whatever it may be,
changing everything to capital letter followed by
changing the whole format. But you need these systems. You know, we'll talk about this, but you know, when it actually comes to and then usually what I do is just shut the session down and then do that on the next song or whatever. When it comes to the mixing, it's about having these processes that you can do so quickly And that's why, you don't need every single plugin. You don't need all the stuff. You don't need all the gear. All you need to do is make, decisions quick while that train of thought is going. And that's why I don't mind having the same plugin on every channel or whatever. And it's just, you should be able to open it up and just mix the song in like 3 hours. And it should be, that was something that we've sort of always done.
Yeah, 3-hour mixes.
It should come together.
I've been talking about this. Bill Price did the Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks. I remember having a conversation with him, and he said he's just a balance engineer, is what he is. I mean, you've got to be able to get a balance up fairly fast, I think, rather than, with what the bass drum sounds like, what the snare. It's how the overall song sounds that's important. So getting the vibe of it up fairly fast is
it's the old thing of like throwing the bass drum up and spending half an hour kind of bass drum sound. What's the point? Everything's about content.
Yeah. So when I mix, I never solo anything anymore. It's always about what it sounds like in the track. I would never solo the kick and then spend hours, EQing that. It's about the balance between everything and how everything sits. And it's, at the end of the day, no one's ever going to hear that kick drum on their own. So why should it sound great on its own?
And it doesn't matter if it sounds crap on its own,
exactly,
as long as it sounds right in the track. It's like they seem like really obvious things, but they're traps that we all fall into at the start. When you start doing it, it's like, I've got to make that sound really good, and it's like then
it's trying not to obsess. I think it's just getting a flow. And the thing about working in the box now, which is good, is that if you do get stuck, you can, you don't have to drive yourself mad. You can just, save it, go on to something else. Get a breathing space, put a monitor mix down, go and listen to it in the car, come back, do something else. So it just keeps the flow of it. Stops you getting frustrated and bored.
Yeah, when that's something you taught me was just print the mix down, and then try something else, or you come back to it, and then you listen.
Or we go for a drive.
Listening to the songs that you worked on, you realize that a week ago it sounded way better. So you just open up that session and then just go back to that.
Yeah, because you can lose. I think it's easy to get obsessed with something and then push it too far, where you had something good but you didn't realize it was good at the time. So that's the other good thing about mixing in the box. The good thing is that you can go back, as Clint just said there. You can document and just put mix one down and then come back in a week's time.
But ultimately, the trap that you can fall into by having that ability to do that is you just never get tracks finished. We all get tracks finished because we know we've got to get them done. But I know, I get a lot of emails from young producers. It's like, I just don't know what to do anymore. They've just totally lost the plot, and it's like, and usually it's quite obvious what the problem is. But you can't see beyond that point of like sort of, just do that and that and that, and all right, it's fine now. It's like then it's taken them like 2 weeks to get to that point. It's just knowing when you're somewhere close. It's I guess you just get that from doing it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we have a relationship where I mix a lot for you, and I get to the point sometimes where, because I know it's okay to send you something, because or Gil working with you and saying, does this sound shit?
Yeah.
Or what I mean? So sometimes it might be sending you a mix that I'm like, this is a really rough work in progress, but I actually think it sounds all right. Am I in the ballpark? Or
it's really valuable to get it mixed to a point that we're both happy before the artist hears it.
Yeah.
Because then you're presenting with something that feels fairly complete, and then get their input on it.
Yeah.
And it's usually
I think it's nice as well, because sometimes Clint will send me something that it's nothing to do with me. It's not a project I've been doing.
Probably your stuff.
So who wants this shit?
And then I can listen to it, and I because we know each other. So if you could find somebody, if you're mixing, that you could send things to, if you do get to that point where you just want a fresh pair of ears, I think that's a nice thing. Sometimes it's just reassurance, or sometimes it might be just someone suggests something. So that's always nice, because you don't always know. I think, and if you're spending a long time on something, it's nice to have a fresh pair of ears just to give you because then you might not agree with them as well. They might say, oh, you should do that, and you go, oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. But it just solidifies that.
And it can be such a solitary thing, especially if you're working on your own at home on a laptop or whatever, and it's like it's hard, if you've got someone you can bounce ideas off. That's why like networks of producers and engineers are really important, because you can just
Highly agree in that.
yeah, you can bounce ideas off each other, and you sort of. We should probably take a few questions while we still got some time. Just who would like to at the back?
Yeah, hey, I've annoyingly got two questions. One of them is very quick, I'm sure. The first is just what you were talking about then with mixes. What do you find the most helpful? This will probably be good for all of you. What is the most helpful with feedback on mixes? Is it reference tracks? Is it specifics? Is it just overall vibes? What's a good way of trying to interpret to someone, especially like over email or a quick message, what you're needing to change, what you're after?
Is that as an artist, are you talking about?
As a producer, maybe to an engineer?
Okay.
Reference tracks are really helpful.
Yeah, reference tracks are really helpful. I personally don't listen to a lot of other, like that monitor mix to me is really, because it might be something that the producer says, listen to the monitor mix, the volume of the guitars, that's where I want them. I like the punchiness of your drums, and I want everything else to be really, really loud and everything massive and loud, but the guitars have to be like that. And then you have to try and interpret that. So I find that monitor mix is hugely important. But usually producers that come to the engineer, they're pretty direct about what they want. It's about the vocal just needs to be louder in that section, But I've had it sometimes where I've had it sometimes when Greg's come in and said, this is just all completely wrong. It's just a disaster.
I've probably got low blood sugar at the time.
Yeah. But it's the wrong vibe. It's the wrong vibe, and you spend hours working around on something, and in the end, it's quite hard to take because you poured your heart and soul into that. But in the end,
Clint.
it's something like the bass is too loud and the vocal needs to come up, or it's just trying a couple of things and then going, what, actually it was pretty good before, but we just,
I think sometimes as well, it's when you send things out, sometimes it's better if the artist or the producer has time to digest it as well, just to see what's happened, because sometimes you get things back that are quite different than what you're expecting, and your initial reaction's like, oh, because it's different, But if you give yourself a day or something, then as a producer, if I get a mix back, I can actually give proper notes, or I've got a better idea of what I liked or what I didn't like about it, where if I just try and send notes straight back, then sometimes you might get that completely wrong, or you might have missed something that was good just because it's slightly different than what you were expecting.
I mean, I always have a sort of a 48-hour policy, whereas if I send a mix to an artist, I won't reply to them for 48 hours, and I tell them, don't contact me for 2 days, because in that time, if they send you a list straight away, there are probably about 50 things on that list. 2 days' time, there'll be maybe 1 or 2 things on that list, because they'll embed it in to what you're trying to do with the mix. Can be, oh, right, actually, this is actually okay, and I like this now. And that's some things I've done with Clint. When I would sort of reply to you too quickly. It's like, and the beauty of living here and having that time is I get a chance to spend all day living with the mix. So usually we're pretty close by that time. But if you just say to the artist, look, take it away for at least a day or 2 days, and then we'll speak in a couple of days' time. And it's amazing what a massive difference that makes.
I think it was also a massive difference to send them the whole album mixed.
Yeah, one song at a time. If you're doing a single, you've got to send one song. But if you send at least like 5 or 6 songs, you get a perspective for the overall feel for the album, as opposed to like you send one song and there's always lots of things that they want to look at. You get to 4 or 5 songs. Do you find that, Gil?
Yeah, I think because it's different. It's sort of slightly different to me because I tend to do albums, but I think, and I don't know, Clint, because you might know more than this. I think if you're an artist and you're getting different people to do different songs, and then you're trying to make an album out of it, try and get it to gel as a cohesive piece of work can be difficult. Whereas I think if I'm doing an album, sometimes what you tend to do is your first 2 mixes or something, you tend to redo them. I mean, it takes you 3 or 4 mixes to get a feel for the album. So I think if you send your first mix to the artist instantly, you're not really happy with it. You haven't really made your mind up what you're trying to do or the general flavour of it. So I totally agree. I think if you can get 4 or 5 mixes done, and then as a mixer or a producer, it gives you an idea as well. And you know the things on the first mix, you know the things that you would change then to make it, because you get better as they go along, really.
Clint just mixed. I just did the new Chills record in Clint, which Clint mixed for me, and we mixed the whole record. And I really genuinely thought we'd pretty much nailed it. And then the band came back with like, can we just try, a bit more reverb on the vocals on everything? Can we just try these 1 or 2 little things? And I'm like, why do they want to do that? Because it sounds great. And then we kind of like sent them about 4 or 5 different options of like, here's some different reverbs, here's some different guitar balances, different things. So they picked, we like guitar balance 1, reverb 3 or whatever. We just applied it to the whole record, and I genuinely think it really made the record. It sounded like them as opposed to us. And I think that feedback from them was really important. I remember at the time being really annoyed and actually getting quite annoyed with Martin on the phone. And it was like, but he was right. He knew what the band should be, and I should have probably respected that straight away. But it was it was kind of real nice because we'd got it in a good place. But just that extra mile kind of made the difference on the record, and so it is good to sort of take the artist on. Ultimately it's their record, not our record. So. Was there a follow-up question you wanted to?
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be really quick, but you were talking about you've got kind of specific ways you like to operate with an engineer and assistant. Is that something you like to have like a pre-meeting about, or is it something you work out in the room? Obviously, Greg needs to talk about where the Hoover and the kettle is. But other than
and the coffee machine.
Other than that conversation, is it?
Well, I think it's like the sessions generally just evolve. So, you don't preempt a situation, but sometimes they happen. But for me, if I have a situation, I have to deal with it. Because I don't really like things brewing. I don't like situations festering into something that shouldn't be. So I think if you nip it in the bud early, it just keeps keeps everyone happy, and just for everyone to know the parameters, the borders, the as I said, sitting in a room with with people, you've got to get on. You've got to be able to work together. So if you don't address difficult situations early, they just grow, and then you end up in a room that's not a creative room.
Have you two had any bust ups yet?
No, I wanted to add to this with maybe no. One thing that I thought was really clever that Gil did before I started working with him again was we spent a lot of time together, just whether it was sending songs to each other. Like we talked, and I came down to his house. He'd invite me down to his house, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm at Gil Norton's house. Look at all those platinum records and all those Grammys. Yes, but it was just hanging out and chatting and talking, and then a couple of months would go by, and then he'd come up and see me, and then we'd go and visit a studio together, and then we talked about stuff, and we pretty much just hung out for a year before we did anything. And what I didn't quite realise during that time was we're just getting so familiar with each other. So when it came time to actually going into the studio, we had like the band could see that we had this kind of natural kind of bond, I guess, or whatever, and we were a team. We were basically a team.
It's very romantic.
So they feel comfortable.
Very romantic. But
I know, yeah, we were dating.
Yeah, we were dating.
I was taking them out for a pint.
But you know what I mean?
You have to have that communication with the artist you're working with. It's
because you got to get, as I said, it's a trust thing. I mean, why would an artist listen to anything I'm going to say to them? I mean, unless they trust you, why would you? So. And you have to earn that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many records I've done. We're talking about this. I'm as good as the next record that I do, And that's you can't go. Well, I did that. So
Yeah,
this
the
is obviously
last thing an artist
doesn't
want to
mean
hear is,
anything.
do you know how many records I've sold? You know?
Do you know who I am?
Yeah, have you heard it? You know, it's like that's this the wrongest way to go about anything. You know, so it's like. So do you want to?
Hi, I'm just wanting to get your perspective on when you're working with a producer. Sometimes they are like quite strong personalities, and you want to try
No,
to
surely not.
communicate your like what's the best way to communicate to a producer maybe that you want something changed, but you know that it's good, but it's not doesn't feel like you know, or and what is something that as an artist you should just not worry about, because when you are listening to your song, everything matters.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, this is what I said before. The pre-production for me is the most important bit, because you know, we should have had those conversations before we were in the studio. You know, I should understand what you're trying to achieve. I should know the songs equally as well as you. And, you know, any modifications that are going to happen, you should understand why they're happening and buy into them. So, you know, hopefully you don't get into a situation where because you don't want these conversations in that room. It's not a good place to have them, because they're not, you know, you waste time then. So pre-production, before you go in there, you should have had good conversations about songs, what you're trying to do. And if it doesn't go well in pre-production, it's not going to go well in the studio. So, you know.
I mean, ultimately, you're the artist, and
Yeah.
the producer's there to serve you, not the other way around.
But if you haven't talked to each other beforehand, then, you know, you're going to feel like you're getting bullied into doing something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And that's not the aim of the game, you know, so.
I mean, I always get like the artist to send me at least a playlist of 10 or 15 songs before we even decide to work together, just to get a feel for what they're trying to do. So you know, James Bradford from the Matchstick Preachers always taught me to go into a song with a sonic image in my head. It's like he would sit there and say, he'd play me like 20 songs, you know, and he'd say, imagine you're in a kind of, you know, it's 1920s New Orleans, you're in a bar, it's full of smoke, you know, and it's like this person walks in the room, and it's like, and he would set up a scene for you, so you kind of knew where the song should be. And I think you have to go into that level of kind of like, you need to have that level of communication before you even start. And because then you run into problems where, but you know, you have to be forceful as an artist at the end of the day.
And I used to do a similar thing with I'd make each band member send me, it used to be a cassette or a CD or something, but you know, of songs that they find relevant to their music or their style, just because I don't know every song in the world, you know. So there might be things that they're really influenced by that I don't know. So it's quite nice to have that I'm listening. So when you're having a discussion about a drum sound, you could play things, and then I can say, oh, I can see what you're aiming at there, or maybe this would be better, or that. So that's a nice little thing as well, just to get the artist to send, you know, as a producer, to send some of their favourite songs or their favourite sonic palettes, you know, things that they're going to say to you, you know, this song that I've written, I quite like this environment that's on this song. And it's a conversation then, because that's what we're all going to have, is conversations, you know, about music.
Communication is everything
Yeah.
when you're making music. If you don't have that, then it's always going to be a problem. The behind there, with your hand up at the yeah.
With the audience these days, they can pull down one song at a time. I was just wondering, has it changed for producers to look at one song at a time rather than think in terms of albums these days?
I think that's fine, mate.
It really depends, because I tend to try and I don't like doing one song with an artist, actually. I'd much rather I don't mind doing an EP, like 4. I'd sort of do that. So I find it difficult to do a song, just because the amount of time it takes to set up to do a song, you could do 3 or 4 songs. The amount of time it takes to rehearse one song, you could talk about quite a few songs. So, and certain songs, that you don't think are going to be singles, suddenly in a pre-production environment take on their own personality, and as you're working through one song, other songs develop and react. So to answer your question, I don't really think about just doing a song because you might have a favourite song, but I think it's nice to have its brothers and sisters around it, just to keep it company and to make sure that that's growing in a good way.
There's always that temptation with an artist that they want to do the most recent song they've written because it's the freshest one.
Well, me and Clint had it the other day, didn't we? Where we picked a song with Moses, and the song that I wanted to do was one song. We might have this tomorrow. I don't know yet. We'll see. But the band really wanted to do another song, and we were like, it was a bit of a shanty type song, and so I pre-produced the song I wanted to do, but actually the other songs turned out to be possibly a bigger song, I think. But from the demo, you didn't know that. It was only when you started analysing it and developing it and seeing where it was going to go, and because of the shape the song that I wanted to do took, then it was easy to mould the other one into making it fit and feel comfortable going there. Whereas I think if I would have went with the song that they want to do and tried to get it to the point it ended up, I don't think it would have got there. So there's no definite way of doing that. To answer your question, I think generally if you can get 3 or 4 songs that you really like, then one of them will shine at some point when you've worked on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ultimately about the song and what's right for the artist, not about what it's compared to out there. Really, you've got to do the best for that song. So if you are working on one song, that's just the simple answer. It's the best thing for that song.
Yeah. I mean, or the artist, because sometimes, some people say, oh, you did the Pixies and you did the Foos and then you do Counting Crows. But I mean, what I'm trying to do is make the best Pixies album or the best Foo Fighters album or It's about that band. It's about trying to find what the band are about, and then you try and make that work for them. So it's not.
Talking more about from the audience's point of view, like the audience sometimes they don't like the album, they just want one song. I'm thinking from an audience.
I think it depends on that person, that specific person listening. I mean, I don't know about you, Gil, but I mean, I still consume music because I was brought up listening to albums, 10-song albums. That's how I still listen to music, because that's the way I was brought up. I know a lot of producer friends of mine, they're used to playlists, they're used to picking one song from one album. I think that ultimately that's down to the person listening. I think as producers, you have to play to your strengths, and I think I prefer working album format and EPs, because I think it's a more satisfying role. But I think you just got to, it's the more you try to second guess the listener, the more you compromise the record you're trying to make. Yeah. And it's so easy to what will so-and-so think? What will the label think? What will this, Ultimately, as producer, you have to serve the artist and make the record for them. Beyond, I've made some records that I think are just, I love to bits that nobody has bought. And I've made some records that I think are distinctly average that have sold a lot of records. And it's like, you just, beyond making the record and making the best record you can make, that's all you can really do. And if you try and second guess what everyone else is going to think about it, then I think you're just going down a path that's going to cause you all kinds of...
I think it's difficult to answer that question in a way, because I can't...
Just thinking of iTunes.
Yeah, no, but it's very difficult because I know people only want to download a song, but that might be different for different people as well. So, I don't think you can...
Yeah, what was your point, Jesse?
I'm going to say, I think it's changing, especially as vinyl's coming back onto the scene. People aren't going to buy that song anyway. They're going to listen to it basically for free on Spotify. So you go back to the albums are getting shorter.
Yeah, 10 tracks is about it.
Yeah.
And it's coming out on vinyl. It's actually a chance for a musician to make money to sell vinyl.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, I mean, because I had vinyl when I was younger, but we never played that. Maybe Pink Floyd I would, but very few times. If I was playing a Bowie album. I'll probably play, one side of Hunky Dory, and then I might put a bit of T-Rex on. And so it might play one side of an album, but I think it's difficult these days with CDs for concentration to play 12 tracks of an artist I don't think people's attention spans are the same or are there. So I think it's quite nice going back to vinyl.
Yeah, it's been really nice having test pressings coming back again from, it's been so many years since, I actually had to go and buy a turntable recently because I'm starting to get so many test pressings through, so I'm going to have to check everything. So, and it's been, the strangest thing was having to get up after 5 songs to turn it over. You're just not used to doing it. It's just not a format you're used to.
I quite like it, just even when I'm trying to think of an album order, I still do it as like a square. So I have the opening track and then the end of side 1 there, and then the opening track of the flip side and the end. So it's quite a nice way of arranging your music as well, that you had these, punctuation marks within a CD. Yeah. I think it's a good.
I mean, while we're on the vinyl issue, I think certainly one of my bugbears has been, if you're gonna do vinyl, you've got to do it properly, and it's like you've just got to be mastered properly for vinyl. I think too many artists are like taking just digital formats and just getting them cut onto vinyl. I think you need to get your specialist cuts done for. We use Ryan Smith at Sterling a lot, and it's like he's a specialist in vinyl, and it always sounds great. And it's like the difference between that and albums that have just been kind of just the digital master's been used to cut. I think it's a premium product now. It's not, you have to go the extra mile to make them sound really good. I don't know what your thoughts on it are.
Yeah, mainly because I guess we're fortunate enough to use Sterling Sound for a lot of mastering in New York, and the digital masters don't sound hugely different to the vinyl masters, but there is a difference, in dynamics and top end and that kind of thing. And they really, to get the most out of it, Ryan anyway tells me that he always does 2 versions, but they're not hugely different, but. You know when it's done properly. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Can I have a question? Yes, sir. I've been on a pretty amazing journey over the last year because I flew to Germany and bought a vinyl lathe and brought it back to Auckland. I'm just like 5 minutes from here, and I got to say, I record, mix, master everything for CD and digital format, and I'm now going especially to get vinyl masters because there's a huge difference. And the difference in what it sounds like on vinyl, because I cut some vinyl down to Greg today, that I only just got back from the master yesterday. It's so massively huge. In fact, the record is so much better on vinyl, and I took a while to take that. Because when I bought the vinyl lathe, the guy that sold me this lathe, I think it's one of the best on the market, there's very few on the market, he actually said to me, vinyl is shit. Why would you want to buy a vinyl lathe? Why would you buy a red German? Which it's taken me a year to get that out of my head, because it's not. It's so great that I actually talking to it's Dave, this guy in that photo right there. I don't know if you know. It's like he mastered my record. He's the guy with the beard there from SAE, and I think he's really good. I can never pronounce his last name though. And it's huge. And he actually came back to me and asked me to adjust some of the instruments. Like he said, the vocal in this song could be down 2 dB, it can't. And I've got it back. I can listen to it on CD, it sounds amazing. On vinyl, it's a different animal, and it sounds even more.
It's really nice. It's going to be, it's starting to get vinyl capacity again, because it was just there were points it was desperate, wasn't it? It was just to get any vinyl done, to get it cut properly, to get it better made. At least now that capacity is coming back, and I think it's it's really pleasing to have. Are you happy to see the return of vinyl, Gil?
Yes.
Is that a little bit of a loaded question? You can't really say no, can you?
Well, I hate
it.
Well, the thing I don't like about CDs is that, when you used to go out, as a kid, I used to save my pocket money and go and buy an album, but it felt like you were getting something precious. It was big, and you could hold it, and you could read the credits. You could see where it was. There's something special about taking it out, and whereas with the CD, it's just a bit like, you know, it feels like it's dispensable.
I mean, the lack of producer credits and engineer credits on you know, on digital formats is pretty shameful.
Well, you can't
really.
read them. You
Yeah.
can't read. I mean, look, I wear glasses anyway, but I mean, I need magnifying glass to.
But
actually
I'm
see.
just trying to find, you know, when I listen to an album on Spotify and I try and find credits for it, it's really hard to find.
It's hard to
you know?
find who mixed or
Yeah.
produced.
And actually, what was interesting is that I've been actually downloading a lot of older records that I worked on, just to sort of like go back and revisit some older things in case there was techniques that I like to reuse, and then digging out the CDs from those records and hearing actually how much better the CD sound to the downloaded version. It was actually genuine. I thought, does the record sound like this? You know, it's like Clint mixed it for me. It should sound pretty good. And then he put the vinyl on. It's like, holy shit! It's actually, you know, it's such a better format to listen on.
Do you know Tommy D? You know, he's got. You know,
Did
Tommy?
Catatonia, a lot of the Catatonias.
Yeah, yeah.
Reckon.
He's got a thing going on called Credit Where Credit's Due, which
Right.
is like a campaign that they've started over in England, which I love. I think it's really important because, you know, especially when you're starting out in this business, I mean, just trying to get your name on the record and getting a credit and people, you know, seeing that and employing you is really important. And I think at the moment, it's one of the things that, you know, it's difficult because I've had things with the band because I can put in the contract that I have to get a credit, but they don't have to credit anybody else. And I've had it with the miss things off and I haven't put things on, and I haven't had any recourse for it, and I can't do anything about it, and it's so frustrating when the engineer doesn't get a credit or the assistants as well, because they're the ones that need them. The ones who are starting off need to get the names on these records so that people understand that they were in the room and were important part of the team.
I mean, it's hugely valuable. It's like, you know,
so
it's just...
it is very important. And so vinyl is great because at least you get
You have your name real
information.
big, you know, you can put your own name really big on it, and it's like, you know, you can have your sort of like your Roger Dean prog rock kind of like double gatefold sleeves, you know, it's like, it's, sorry.
He's about to do his own record. So
Yeah, I'm just, amazingly, I'm actually going to, Clint's actually been producing, because I refused, you know, it was always going to be like sort of, if I'm going to do this record with my old band, it's a band I was actually in when I was 17 years old, and we're going to release our album 40 years after we released our first single, which will be next year, and we're trying to finish it. We've been trying to finish it for 5 years now, haven't we?
It's taken a long time,
Yeah, it's kind of hard when you get old and fat, you know, to try and regain that teenage enthusiasm. But it's we're gonna do vinyl, and it's gonna be a gatefold sleeve, you know. It's like it's just on a, you know, play prog when you get older, you know, sort of, and try and play it on 4 drums instead of like, because I used to have a kit like that guy who came and did your first session, you know, 2 kick drums, 8 concert toms. Trying to play it on a 4-piece is a bit tricksy. Couple more questions before we wrap it. Any more? Is it?
Influence do you as producers have in the mastering of a record?
Pick the mouse.
But you know, I always think it's like the dark art. It's like, because I've been with you know, Bob Ludwig. I'd go there. I mean, people would pay me to go to like you know, Newport and
Not Newport, South Wales.
Sorry, not Newport. Sorry, Portland, not Newport. Portland, where Bob Ludwig's place. And I go there, and I like Bob, and he'd take me out, and we had lobster, and you know, it'd be great. And you put it on, and I'd know roughly what I wanted to do with it. And then he'd do his magic and put, you know, whatever he was doing. And then he got, so, yeah, Gil, so this is it now. And you listen to it, go, that's fucking awesome, yeah. And this is before, and you go, oh, that's not very good then, is it? But, I mean, you know, it's like a dark art to me sometimes. So I don't really, I mean, the guy we've been using,
Ryan Smith.
Ryan Smith, it was Clint introduced me to, and I think he's really good because he's just taken what we do and just made it a bit more 3D.
Louder.
You know what I mean? It's a bit.
Well,
Well, the first time he sent me anything, actually, I sent it back. I thought it was a bit overdone. I think he was trying to overhype it or over-impress me, and I didn't like it as much. And then he sent me a revised thing, and it was awesome, because most of the time, especially working with Clint now, when we've got a mix, it's something, we're nearly there with it. I mean, all I want it is to transfer from that format to that format, really, and so on, to do that well. But I don't want it to be radically different from what I've done.
I mean, that relationship with the mastering engineer is I think is really important.
Yeah.
And we when we would make records, we kind of know it's often Ryan, but it's sometimes we would make the record with someone else in mind, Tom Coyne or someone like that. But I mean, the key is to use guys who really know what they're doing, because there's a lot of bad mastering out there, and I think if you use the guys who are great, and it's not stupidly expensive. It might seem a lot, but I mean, a big problem with mastering budgets is nobody thinks about them till the end. I mean, when you're budgeting for a record, you want to budget for your studio time, your engineer, your mastering engineer, and get those figures in early so everyone knows where they stand. You're not like, I spent all the money, I need to get mastering done. That's when the problems start arising.
Yeah, I'd like to answer your question about, you said about whether producers, the influence on the mastering engineer. Because I think, especially from being a mixer point of view, I think the mixer actually has a massive influence on where it goes to mastering. And there's two factors here. One is whether the band has a label. And if they don't have a label and you're mixing for them, generally they ask who you use, or you tell them, I recommend you use this person because they do 99% of my stuff. And they just go, well, great, if you think they're the guy, let's use the guy or the girl or whatever. But then there's the other side when the label's involved. And I think, often they will ask the producer or the mixer, but sometimes they have their own agenda. They will use basically Ted Jensen because he's the guy who's done everyone. I think
It's just labels.
Yeah, when the label's involved, it gets a little bit less personal. But
Well, it can get with A&R, man. It's just sometimes when you're doing a project if you've got an A&R guy on the session, he cares for the band, but then it feels like it's his, has to put his input into it. So, they'll insist that you do it with this person because that's where they've done all their records. So, but generally, as I said, it should just be a transferring of the information that you're giving the mastering engineer. So it's not they're not going to remix it. You know what I mean? They can.
Sometimes they can mess it up though.
They can.
Yeah.
It can be over.
We really, for a long time, we only had 301 in Sydney, unless we had a big budget to send.
Yeah. I mean, Chris Chetland's really good here. He does some really good work. Chris over at COG. I think he's the best mastering engineer in the country. I think he's really conscientious as well.
Yeah, I think you also build up relationships. You get familiar with who you use. So I'm almost sometimes afraid of using someone else. It's just because they're good. It's just like Gil uses an engineer for a certain amount of years, and then or Greg uses me as a mix engineer, or you have people that you trust. That's the thing.
Your team's really important, and the mastering engineer is part of that team. And we did an interesting experiment a couple of years ago where we were producing a band. I was producing it. We were recording a band from the Netherlands, and Ryan mastered the whole album. And I thought it'd be really interesting to get the single mastered by Tom Coyne while he was still alive, because he's very much a pop guy. He did all the Taylor Swift stuff, and I just thought it'd be an interesting experiment, and we had the budget to do it, and so we got Tom to do it after speaking to Ryan and saying we're going to get Tom to do it, and just don't get freaked out. We just want to and it was and actually the album version was Ryan's version and the single was Tom's version, and when you put them side by side, they're like Tom's tended to pop out the vocal more. It felt like more of a pop master from the same mix that you did.
Yeah,
it was really interesting, and they were both great, and they were just slightly different, and probably we'd noticed the difference. But you know,
Everyone else.
I don't think any the label certainly would have noticed a difference. We kind of told them what they should use, but it was I thought it was a work, as it was an experiment worth doing, and it was just those subtle differences that different mastering engineers bring to the. But just the key is just got to use the good guys, because that's just going to save us a lot of heartache otherwise. One last question before we wrap it up. Anybody?
Do you guys use mid-side when you are mixing? Some mid-side technique? If so, for what?
Not specifically mid-side, but I might jump to a plugin that has some sort of widening thing, maybe. But I tend to...
Do you want to explain that? What that is, Smith?
Mid-side?
Yeah.
I'm probably not the best person. I've forgotten. What do you mean? Like what actual the technique of mid-side?
Is that a?
What do you mean? Like if someone's recorded a figure of eight and a cardioid, do you mean? And if you've been given that information to record a piano, is that what you mean, or?
To make your guitars wider.
Oh, your guitars, okay.
Oh, like sort of like stereo widening kind of thing.
Yeah, so like a widening type thing. Yeah, I mean, every now and then I wouldn't personally, we wouldn't jump for it. It's just, I think, it's one of those things you just, if you feel like it needs it, yeah. But, so it's a bit vague, but no, I don't really. I mean, maybe with a bit more pop stuff, I would on like keyboards and synths and stuff like that, but being very aware of what it's doing to the low end and making sure that maybe it's just some sort of widening stuff in the top end to make it a bit more, I don't know, a bit bigger in the chorus or something like that. But
phase issues are always it's like,
we're not phased. We never do anything like that on the guitars or anything really.
Because back in mine at Gil's day, we always had to sum everything in the mono to check everything in mono, didn't we? To make sure we work on rate, because all radio was mono. It's like
good. It's still good practice. I think checking things in mono just to see what your mono balance is really important anyway.
Because if you're doing a lot of widening, you find that you're going to get a lot of guitars are going to dip, they're going to disappear, and it is a good.
There's a couple of I think plugins that do it better than others. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I think you just got to be a little bit careful that you just do it for the sake of it.
Yeah. It's like when a whiskey mixer, don't put too much whiskey in. Just go a little bit. I reckon we should go and get some dinner. I reckon. So. Thank you both so much. It's always great to have you guys coming in. So big hand for Gil and Clint.